that there are, all of us are carrying surveillance cameras around with us on a daily basis. The growth of body cameras on police all across the Commonwealth and across the country, we're really raising the stakes that once facial recognition technology got good enough, we were all going to be living in an automated sort of dystopian surveillance society, right? This realization happened at the same time that a researcher here in Massachusetts, Joy Buolamwini, was finding at MIT at the Media Lab in a landmark study that she published in 2018 that facial recognition algorithms being sold and made available by some of the most prominent technology companies in the world had serious racial and gender bias issues embedded into the algorithms themselves. She did a famous study that has been published all over the place called Gender Shades that formed the inspiration for later work that was done by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, which is a federal government, nonpartisan federal government technology testing organization. They found in 2019 that after examining 200 some commercially available facial recognition algorithms, that Joy was right, and that there is bias in many of these face surveillance systems themselves, making them less likely to accurately clock Black women in particular, making them less likely to clock accurately older people, believe it or not, and children, and women. So finding, in fact, that the algorithms really only performed consistently well across the board for middle-aged white men. So that is clearly not most of us, right? So taking this knowledge about the inherent bias in some of these systems, taking the knowledge that we had about, looking at China, for example, and its use of face surveillance in the Xinjiang province to police the Uyghurs, we knew, the combination of a potentially, dystopian kind of surveillance society combined with the racial bias inherent in these systems, both of those are serious problems. And so we launched a campaign to bring democratic control over police use of facial surveillance technology here in Massachusetts. And I'll just say one more thing about that. We've had quite a bit of success. We were told when we first launched this campaign, that's a joke. Nobody's gonna, this technology is inevitable. There's no way that you guys are gonna cabin it in any way. The police are gonna do what they want. The tech companies are gonna do what they want, and your campaign is gonna fail, right? Well, they were wrong. They were wrong because we still live in a democracy. Despite what Donald Trump and his band of fascists are trying to do to this country, we do still live in a democracy. And here in Massachusetts, we were able to mobilize a very broad coalition of racial justice, civil rights, gender justice, LGBT organizations, religious groups, and others to band together and bring our demands to the state legislature and to communities across the state and municipalities. And we won. We won 8 bans on municipal use of face surveillance at the local level. We also won, as it was mentioned before, one of the first state laws in the country regulating police use of facial recognition here. So I tell that story only because there are significant odds that we face as a country, right? There are significant threats to our democracy. The billionaires that are telling us we can't regulate big tech, they have a lot of power, right? But we have power too. And there are way more of us than there are of them, right? And so if we are strategic, we can be effective and we can beat them and we can pass Senator Markey's bill.
Well, thank you. I mean, how great is this? So now we're going to the cleanup hitter here, Amani White. And Amani, you've already heard it, we've got discrimination here, Uber, Amazon, and then we've got historic discrimination that just is gonna fast forward. We've got automated, that Rasan is talking about. And then we have all the denial that comes out of the industry, just, bend a knee to AI geniuses while they just completely take all of our privacy, all of our identities and use them for however they want. Then we go to Rochford, let's apply it on a local level. So now your concerns that the mortgages, that the employment, that who gets an education is all going to be affected. And they're going to try, as Kate was just saying, who really needs these Black, or poor people, let's just figure out with the algorithm how how to like transform this real estate development into our own little, you know, clay pen where that doesn't have to get the protection. So tell us about that, if you can, Amani, and just bring it home to the local level.
Yes, yes. You hit it right on the head. And it's been a great panel, just talking about all the different ways in which artificial intelligence, it's really hurting our communities. I'm trying to, as they spoke, I was thinking, how can I add to this discussion? I think one thing that is that folks don't know that's also happening when it comes to artificial intelligence is the way that it's been used to price gouge for renters. So, like, raise your hand if you know someone who rents or you rent. Everyone in this room, right? So, not everyone's unit in here is probably getting repaired at the rate that their rent is increasing, right? And that is in part due to the fact that there are companies like RealPage using programs like YieldStar, based in Texas, to essentially use machine learning to artificially increase your rent. And that is an issue that affects all of us. But it also especially affects people who are, don't have a lot of money, people who come from communities that don't have access to good jobs. And so when you think about how just this one example is affecting people right here in Massachusetts and across the country. It's just an example of the greed of artificial intelligence. And I think what Cade mentioned earlier about what does it take to actually fight back against this? It really takes every single one of us in here and 20 people because anytime we're demanding justice, we need a lot of people. You mentioned watching movies as a kid. I remember watching this movie. I think it's called Ants. And as there's a scene where like the grasshoppers are like, if they find out how many of them there are, then they're gonna win. And that's really what we need to figure out. I think as we're watching, the assault at the federal level in all the different ways, watching artificial intelligence be used, all these different ways. It really is up to us as people, as whatever job you may have, to take advantage, to do as much as you can to advocate, to make sure that Senator Markey's bill passes, and that advocates who are doing work here at the state level, the city level, to pass bills, that they have the support of the people behind them. Because it's not enough for us five to sit here and come up with a great idea. If you guys to clap for us, we need to see everyone here being a part of this movement. And I'm sure a lot of you are, so if you are, thank you. But for those who feel like, I like ChatGPT, it helps me do my homework and I don't really want to get involved. No, this is something that is going to affect you, is going to affect your parents, your grandparents, your children, generations to come. And you want to be a part of saying, yeah, I did something about that. This is the modern day civil rights movement. And you are watching it happen or you're a part of it. And that's why I think at the local level here in Roxbury, we often say this thing, we want development without displacement. So it's not about being against technology in the future and investment, but it's about how do we make sure that as we advance, whether it's buildings on public land or what have you, that we're thinking about, to Rasam's point, to Chrissy's point, who are the workers, who are the people who are being hired to write the script, how are we being intentional about how we advance our society? And so, yeah, as each one of you think about the ways that I have or has not affected, think about the ways, the things you can do to fight back. And maybe it's not AI is your main thing, although it should be part of it. Maybe you're part of Target boycott. Maybe you are helping people in your neighborhood register to vote. But we need like a revolution of how we interact with each other with power to really stop this assault. So that's what I'll add.
Oh, great job. So development without displacement.
Yeah.
And what we're saying in AI is innovation with inclusion. Mm-hmm. You get a vote. You don't have to say, "Oh, you can't touch it because you're interfering with innovation." No. We can make sure that everyone is included, and it is going to be a campaign, though. What was the name of your cartoon character who you became?
From Terminator?
Yeah, what was that?
Oh, Sarah Connors. Yeah, she was not cartoon. She was like the tough woman who drove the motorcycle and fought robots.
Yeah. Well, before all your time, I was Crusader Rabbit. I think Crusader Rabbit was doing the same thing. Okay? Just to be out there, fighting for truth, justice, the American way. So that's what it has to be all about. So let's let each of you give kind of the summary. Okay, what do you want each of them to remember from this discussion? Okay, what if they were just gonna say, I just went to this great gathering and it's been transformative how I view all of these issues and what they're gonna mean in a very brief period of time for our civilization. And what we do here is gonna become a global standard, okay? So we have to decide if we're gonna, if we're going to have this discussion, which we have to, which is why I've introduced the legislation. And how, and what is it that like, why do we need to do it? And why do we do it? Why do we need to do it now? So maybe, maybe we can start over with you, Kate.
Sure.
We'll come back across and let everyone give their concluding statement to this incredibly brilliant audience that we have here. By the way, even when you're talking about this discrimination, when I was starting in law school, it was like 5% of the class was black and 5% were women. Well, at Northeastern Law School right now, 75% are women and minorities, huh? Oh, they got smart very fast, didn't they? There was a discriminatory bias built into the admissions process. When my wife started medical school, 5% were women. Now there were a majority of medical students in America. So it was a built-in bias that was created, and you can supercharge it with AI. You can make it look more sophisticated, right? But in the end, you're still trying to get the same result. So that's really why it's so great to be here at Northeastern, because you have technology, you have culture, you have the law, everything is combined here in this one great school. So Kate, we'll begin with you, giving your final message to this incredible audience.
Thank you, Senator. I think I would just say that we hear a lot from, again, these Silicon Valley bigwigs that they're the only ones who understand the technologies. Other people shouldn't meddle. The government shouldn't meddle. Social sciences shouldn't opine. The rest of us are morons, and we should just let them create the future for us. They're obviously wrong about that, but the problems that we see in technology today, a concentration of power, the exacerbation of wealth inequalities, and the attendant problems with power and asymmetries that produces. Those are the same problems that we have with our democracy, right? And we can't solve one without solving the other, right? We have to solve our democracy problems in order to be able to address our technology problems. And frankly, the problem with AI, I think the biggest problem with AI, in addition to the fact that it can amplify and extend into the future historical bias, is that it concentrates power very effectively. There are only a handful of companies in the world that have the capacity to develop the chatbots that we're seeing taking over the internet. It is very important that we leverage our democratic power to ensure that those handful of people and billionaires do not end up enslaving all of us, right? And so that's what I would really say, is that these are democracy issues. They're really basic democracy issues. And that's frankly why I'm so happy to work at the ACLU, because we focus on a range of democracy issues. Voting rights is a technology justice issue, right? Without robust voting rights, without addressing gerrymandering in this country, we are not going to be able to address the problems that we have with the corporate capture of Congress and the failure to pass legislation like Ed Markey. So I would just say the problems with our democracy are inherently related to our problems with technology and vice versa. Thanks very much.
Beautiful, great job.
Yeah, I mean, one of the features of this bill is the ability to consider disparate impact. And I think that's a critical piece. When we talk about civil rights laws, there are very few that will allow consideration for redress based on disparate impact. And there are arguments that the reasons disparities exist in society is because they're naturally occurring, right? Black people are less intelligent, therefore they're less likely to make it into institutions of higher education. That's not the truth of the matter, but if you allow to let these large language model and machine learning entities continue to evaluate the data that just exists, i.e. Amazon, that will be what will continue to exist. And that's why it's critically important that we have legislation like this, but also that we are engaged in the truth telling about who this nation is, who it has been, where it is headed, if we do not change course. And so there is value in this technology. There are values in the tools, but if all of us are not included at the table of determining how these tools can work for the betterment of society, then we will see an exacerbation of the harms and the disparities that already exist. This is a critical moment, and we cannot allow it to pass without doing all that we can to make sure that the technological divide and gap that already exists does not widen to the point of elimination of some of the most marginalized people in this society. And so to Armani's point, to Cade's point, to Chrissy's point, this is the rallying cry for us to mobilize. We have never in the history of this nation sat idly by and allowed our rights to be trampled upon, to allow people to be taken advantage of without some form of resistance. This is the resistance movement. It may not look the same and feel the same for everyone, but this is that critical movement. This is that critical moment in the movement where we need to rally together.
Beautiful. Chrissy Lynch.
Everything they said, and I would just add, I also felt extreme rage when you told the story about the tech dude who said, like, we're gonna, regulations is gonna be what we can cause cancer. And I just wanna zoom out a little bit and just say, like, all of us together, we just need to, like, reject the false choices that this corporate technocrat billionaire class puts on us. Like, we can have responsible artificial intelligence without stifling innovation. We can have good homes for people in our communities without saying the workers have to make so little. We can have responsible climate policies while still being responsible energy-wise. They are constantly trying to pit people against each other, and artificial intelligence is just going to exacerbate this if we're not really intentional about ensuring that there are safeguards into it. And not ensure, this stuff should be used to fight gender inequality, to fight racial inequality, to fight income inequality, all at the same time. But that's only going to happen if we are intentional about doing those things all together. And I just want to add one other thing that we didn't talk about much today, but certainly in the new like fascist country that we're moving towards, we're not there. We need to fight. But artificial intelligence and the role of it and the misinformation that is being pumped out every day cannot be understated. It is, or overstated rather. I mean, it's a real problem. And this stuff has a huge role in the bad direction our country is moving in. And I just want to say that, and I'm going to pass it to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to
And it should be used for good.
Yeah.
Not for evil. And Amani, you have the final word.
Just continuing the message that everyone in here has power. Don't be afraid. When you leave out of here, think about yourself, 2 other people that you can, based off where you live, think about calling your state rep, your state senator, and talking about. We have a bill right now. We're part of the Homes for All coalition. We have a bill by Senator Friedman, which would make it illegal for landlords to use AI for any type of rental home purchasing. I wish Senator Moore was still here to hear that. But that's something that each one of you, if you live in Massachusetts, you have a state rep that can sign on to that bill. If you hadn't made that call, that's what we're talking about. We're calling you into the movement right now. We need you. We can't do it alone. So I think that's the big message I want people to take away. And if you're doing that, pat yourself on the back and do it 5 times harder because we need everyone, even the people really did to step it up and really be a part of this next phase. And I guess the last thing I'll say is if you would like to support local organizations doing this kind of work, Reclaim Roxbury, you can join, become a member. We love Northeastern students joining the fight.
So this is the greatest panel. It could be assembled to talk about AI, not just here in Massachusetts, but across the rest of the country. Because we're not just the base state, we're the brain state. We gotta go first. We're the Center for Biotech, Trump's trying to kill it. We're the Center for Clean Tech, Trump's trying to kill it. We're the Center for Education, Trump's trying to kill it. We're the Center for rolling out the red carpet for immigrants to come to our state and to our nation. Trump's trying to kill it. So to the extent to which we're the target, And we thank Harvard for fighting. We thank Wilmer Hale, the law firm, for fighting. Okay, other law firms might give, other universities might give, but Northeastern's not giving. And Harvard's not giving. We're not giving. We're Massachusetts, okay? And we're only 2% of America. We're not an ordinary 2%. So we have to stand up first. And that goes back to the abolitionist movement, the suffragette movement, the same-sex marriage movement. We're up first, okay? We're fighting. We're trying to be at the cutting edge, okay? And nothing is more at the cutting edge than AI. Because AI affects everything. And they brag about it. You know, yeah, 10% of jobs gone. Your privacy gone. Your identity gone. You're all going to be a part of our wonderful money-making machine that comes out of Silicon Valley. And very few of the people designing these algorithms look like anybody in this room. You all know what I mean, okay? So that's what this whole thing is about. We have to stand up, we have to fight, and we have to make this case. And by being here at Northeastern, I think we're at the center of the resistance. You're right, because this is where it has to start. Thank you all so much. Thanks for being great.